All right, today we're going to build an entity framework application. We're going to do database first because I think that's a lot easier to do. If you're interested, let me know. I'll make another video where we do code first. But we're going to do database first, entity framework. It doesn't really matter which type of application we pick. We're going to be able to do entity framework with pretty much any of them. But I'm going to grab an ASP.NET Core web application. I'm going to hit next. And I'm just going to go through all the defaults here really quickly. I'm going to choose MVC just because that's what I like, but pick whatever you want. All right, here we go. Excellent. So first, we're going to install a package real quickly. So right click on your project, manage NuGet packages, and we're going to paste in here Microsoft.entityframeworkcore.design. Latest 503 is good. Install. I accept. We're going to go ahead and run some commands, super simple commands that you can copy and paste and change. So if you just open one of your files, for instance, your startup here, you can right click on startup once it's open in the top left here, or you can just right click right on it here, and you're going to go to open containing folder. That's going to open the folder on your computer. So right here you're in the CSPROJ level. You can right click there and open in Windows Terminal. If you don't have that, just run PowerShell and go to that folder. But this is how I get to it. So once you're in here, I'm going to show you those commands now. And I've separated them out into 3 lines just to show you. But it's actually going to be in 1 line when we execute it. So the first part of it is .net, which is just the .NET command line, or .NET CLI if you have a .NET command line interface. You haven't heard of that, I'm sure you have. EF for entity framework. DbContext, we're building a context with which we're going to access our database. And then the keyword scaffold. And then we're going to hit a space, and then you're going to go ahead and put your connection string. I've just got the Northwind database installed on my local SQL Express. Your SQL Express connection might look a little different if you're running localhost. Just instead of desktop, it might be like /SQL Express. Or if you're using SQL Server authentication instead of Windows authentication, it might be quite a bit different. And there's a lot of sites out there you can build connection strings with. They'll build them for you. Just kind of enter some things. But anyways, so after scaffold, you'll have a space, and then you'll have your connection string. And then after that, you'll have a space, and you'll have this this here, Microsoft.entityframeworkcore.SQL server. And then -O is the command argument to tell you kind of the folder in which to put the generated classes. So Entity Framework is actually going to generate classes that match with properties exactly the same as your column names in SQL Server. And this is the folder that it's going to create and put them inside of. So let's go ahead and put this all together now in 1 line and see if it works. Here we go. Ooh, build started. Build succeeded. But as you can see, it kind of guides me through it. It says I have not referenced the package yet. So that's kind of cool. You can just copy and paste that, and then we'll just come back here and run it again. Sometimes you do get that error. As you can see, I do have it installed. It's saying I don't have it installed. It's kind of a quick double check. You could just click on the project in .NET Core or .NET 5. Just clicking on the project, you can see it's .NET 5. This kind of shows you what's installed, and here it is here. So it might just be that we need to reload or rebuild the project here. So I'm just going to rebuild in my case, and then we can kind of run that again. There we go. There is a newer version out there. I think it'll be fine. So let's just jump right into it. So going back in here, you can see there's the models folder there, and these are all classes that didn't exist before, right? These are totally Entity Framework classes that match exactly that of my database. So let's just pop that open and show you real quick. So for instance, we're looking right now at the customer demo class. So here's customer demo table, and so here's a customer ID that matches that. Here's a virtual customer, which means that this table has references out to the customer um, table, which is over here, customers. So what's kind of cool about Entity Framework is that it puts those links together for you, which you'll see soon why that's so important. However, if you don't have your table set up properly with foreign keys, like for instance, a student belongs to a class, class belongs to a school, if you don't have those foreign keys set up correctly, it was not going to generate very nicely, and in fact, it'll probably give you some errors and definitely some warnings. So make sure you get your database normalized before you run your Entity Framework tools to generate your classes. All right, well, let's just dive right in. So looking over here in your list of models that it's generated, you're going to be looking for one specific file. And that important file name is called northwindcontext.cs. Now, for you, it might be called something else, but it's going to have the word context in it. All right, I'm going to hit Shift Alt Enter and make this a little bigger for you, just because now we're getting into the code. So as you can see, it inherits from DbContext, so any of the references to that we could use. And what it's done is anything, it's taken made a DB set for each one of the tables. So if you're to add additional tables later and you don't want to run a command to generate it, you're going to have to type in like a DB set in here and put your new class that you've manually generated. However, I do have a trick for you so that you don't have to create those classes manually. We're going to work, well, I'll show you an extension that I use. If you scroll down a little bit further, it shows on model creating, and it kind of has a bunch of properties that is built out for those models for you based on things in the database it might have found, like whether it's an ID, the length of the field, and then you can tack on an attributes class where you could put more UI specific things such as required. Okay, go to your startup.cs. We are actually going to paste in under configure services something that you would already have if we had chosen a different template. Okay, so depending on which template you're using, for instance, if you're using an MVC or a Blazor app, one of the apps, and you've chosen individual user accounts, identity, authorization, authentication, then you've already got this in here. You can skip this step. But if you're using a different type of application, then you don't have it, so you're just gonna have to paste it in here, and that is this services.add_dbcontext, and then application DbContext is the one that you'd get if you use that template. But in our case, I think I said it was called Northwind because that was the name of the database that it generated. Let me see here. You go back to models, Northwind context, and control dot using the model's namespace where that lives. And then we're going to use SQL Server because that's the database that we're using. Using Entity Framework Core, control dot tells me which library I should use for that. And now we've got to specify our connection string somewhere. I'm not telling you where you need to put it, but in this case, we're going to go ahead and put it in the app settings.json. So we can go ahead and put it out here. So if you give a space like that, and then you could put default connection, and we want to use the same one that we had earlier. So in my case, it's going to be everything in these quotes here. So go ahead and go to your controllers folder, open your home controller. Every single controller and every service that you want to use Entity Framework to make a SQL query in, you're going to need to inject access to that context. And don't worry, it sounds way more complicated than it is. Go ahead and add a private read-only context for it. In our case, remember, Northwind context. Looks like it's already in scope here. And then you're going to inject it by means of the constructor here. And I know most of them you put the interface, but with this one, it's just Northwind context. give it a name, and then assign it db equal to the value of your parameter here. And that's it. That's done. Now you can use it anywhere in your controller. So in our index method, if we wanted to gain access, we could do db dot. And as you can see, there's all these pre-made methods here, but you want to skip past that and go down to the names of the tables that you have. So for instance, customers is right there. And here's where you can really take advantage of Entity Framework, because you do have the choice of doing complicated joins like you would in SQL Server, for instance. You could do .join, but it actually looks, in my opinion, even uglier than in SQL Server, and that's not why we're doing this. What you can take advantage of are these link queue operations. Like, check this one out. First or default. Then you could say, myvar dot, and there's all your columns from the table, like phone. So you could say, why don't we say, let's see, I'm not really sure what's in that database, so why don't we just say country, where country is equal to Canada, and that will return all those records. Now, what's interesting is first or default. If you've used this outside of Entity Framework, these link queue operations, you've already got a leg up in the game. But this is going to return null if it didn't find anything. So you could say if x equal to null, throw exception, no Canadian customers, oops, that should be new exception. Getting back to that join real quick, let me show you that join without a join, right? That's one of the reasons we wanted to use this. So we do var y equal to, and then we could do employees, and I'll show you why employees is a good choice. If you open employee, you see it has this hash set of orders in there because it identified that there's a link, a foreign key going out to orders. So I could do db.employees.first or default. Of course, you could do where here, of course, where x, if you wanted multiple records, where x, I don't know, we could do last name equals John, and then here's where it gets interesting, dot orders, and then you could say, dot first or default z, oops, z, and then here you got access to the orders fields. You're already in that next table without having to do some fancy join. Order date equal to whatever. So there's some things you could do like that. I guess getting right back to the basics. I'm sure if you're going to be doing Entity Framework, you want to do some inserts, some updates, and some selects. So we've seen some selects. Some of the inserts are kind of interesting. You could do, first of all, you could just create using one of these models, any model over here. Let's do invoice. Invoice equal to new invoice. Oops. Hit space, fill out some of these fields. Make sure you get all the required fields. Oh, this is probably a number, isn't it? Let's hover over that. It is a float. Fill out all the required fields. Let's pretend that we've got all the required fields here, because it'll give you an error if you didn't. And then you're going to want to save the changes. So let's do db.add. You can do add range if there's multiple ones. We're going to add the invoice. And then we could do db.save changes. And that is actually what writes it out to the database. You can write an overload for save changes if you want to do something like every single time. I've seen that before. Let's see. So updating is super easy. So you could do db. And actually you can query like a select, and then just modify the items in the select, and then you save it. So for instance, this X that we just did up here, we could actually piggyback off of that. We could just say, of all the things in X, the things we want to change is the contact title and maybe something else, I don't know, postal code. Okay. Now we can do db.update X and db.save changes. And then for all these methods that I showed you, there's also the async, just async in front of it. You saw async save changes on that list. So we've done an update, we've done a insert, we've done a select. So that is kind of the basics of it. There is real joins, like I said earlier. You also have the ability to call stored procedures. You also have the ability to update this again. And this is all just database first. And being that we're doing database first, you may decide to go to your database and add an additional table. And you might want to put that in here later, right? So let's show you how to do that. Real quickly, I'll just make a two column table and we'll save it as Chris test. Okay. So if I refresh this, go to tables, Chris test is there. So if you do manage your extensions, and then for me, I've already got it installed. So if I go to installed, EF Core Power Tools is the one that I use. There is something similar out there for Entity Framework 6, but I figured there's no point in talking about it here because we've already diverted so far away from EF6 in this video. For instance, we didn't look for EDMX here, and we generated this stuff with the command prompt instead of going through Visual Studio, which is all what you do in EF6 as far as I'm aware. But this EF Core Power Tools, once you got that installed, then you can go and just right-click way up here on the top of your solution. Go to EF Core Power Tools and go to Reverse Engineer. And then we'll just go ahead and hit Add. And in here, you're just going to paste in the server name portion of your connection string, not your whole connection string. And either pick Windows Authentication or SQL Server Authentication, whatever you used. And then if you don't see your databases show up in the dropdown, then you need to fix your connection up there first. In my case, we did the Northwinds database. There's a lot of choices under advanced. I'm not going to go through any of those. Let's just go ahead and hit OK. And then hit OK again. And let's see where it put it. Oh, there it comes. So this popped up. This kind of looks like the EF6 way of doing things, but that's okay. Expand out tables, and there you can see Chris test has a little thing saying I don't have a primary key to find, which means it might fail, but this is how you would import a whole bunch of them at once. And really all it's going to do is just create the models for you. So as you can see, Northwind context, that's good. And you know, you could fill these things out if you wanted to make it a little bit more elaborate. I'm going to just go ahead and hit OK. And boom, it generated this class for us. Chris test, that's the class it generated for us, and it modified the Northwind context file, as you could see. So you don't have to do that and put all this stuff in here for you. So now what we could do is back here in the home controller, we could go ahead and, oops, we could do db.christest, and you could create a new Chris test and add it, delete it, whatever, select from it, just like you do with all your other tables. All right, well, Entity Framework is kind of a large topic. I've spent a lot of time in it. I don't know everything, but I know quite a bit. So now that we've covered the basics, I'd really like if you guys would shoot me some ideas that you have of things you'd like me to show you, and we can definitely put that together. So let's call this the the Entity Framework .NET 5 Basics, and we'll move into some more specific videos / classes as you'd like. All right, thank you so much for watching. We'll talk to you later. Bye.